This is Living My Life, Chapter 3. Helen Mencken was away at work. Anna was out of job just then. She prepared tea and we sat down to talk. Berkman inquired about my plans for work, for activity in the movement. Would I like to visit Freiheit office? Could he be of help in any way? He was free to take me about, he said. He had left his job after a fight with the foreman, a slave driver. He commented, he never dared drive me, but it was my duty to stand up for the others in the shop. It was rather slack now in the cigar making trade, he informed us, but as an anarchist, he could not stop to consider his own job. Nothing personal mattered, only the cause mattered, with capital C. Fighting injustice and exploitation mattered. How strong he was, I thought. How wonderful in his revolutionary zeal. Just like our martyred comrades in Chicago. I had to go to West 42nd Street to get my sewing machine out of the baggage room. Berkman offered to accompany me. He suggested that on our way back we might ride down to Brooklyn Bridge on the elevated and then walk over to William Street where the Freiheit office was located. I asked him whether I could hope to establish myself in New York as dressmaker. I wanted so much to free myself from the dreadful grind of slavery at the shop. I wanted to have time for reading, and later I hoped to realize my dream of a cooperative shop. Something like Vera's venture in What's to Be Done, I explained. You have read Chernyshevsky? Berkman inquired in surprise. Surely not in Rochester. Surely not, I replied, laughing. Besides my sister Helena, I found no one there who would read such books. No, not in the dull town in St. Petersburg. He looked at me doubtfully. Chernyshevsky was a nihilist, he remarked, and his works are prohibited in Russia. Were you connected with nihilists? They are the only ones who could have given you the book. I felt indignant. How dared he doubt my word? I repeated angrily that I had read the forbidden book and other similar works, such as Turgenev, Fathers and Sons, and Obrev, The Precipice, by Goncharov. My sister had got them from students, and she let me read them. I am sorry if I hurt you, Berkman said in a soft tone. I did not really doubt your word. I was only surprised to find the girl so young who had read such books. In an old building up to dark and creaking flights was the office of Freiheit. Several men were in the first room setting type. In the next, we found Johann Most standing at the high desk, writing. With a side glance, he invited us to sit down. My damned torturers there are squeezing the blood out of me, he declared querulously. Copy, copy, copy. That's all they know. Ask them to write a line? Not they. They're too stupid and too lazy. A burst of good-natured laughter from the compromising room greeted Most's outburst. His gruff voice, his twisted jaw, which had so repelled me on my first meeting him, recalled to me the caricatures of Most in the Rochester's papers. I could not reconcile the angry man before me with the inspired speaker of the previous evening, whose oratory had so carried me away. Berkman noticed my confused and frightened look. He whispered in Russian not to mind Most. That he was always in such a mood when at work, I got up to inspect the books, which covered the shelves from floor to ceiling, row upon row. How few of them I had read, I mused. Most approached me. His deep blue eyes looked searchingly into mine. Well, young lady, he said, have you found anything you want to read? Or don't you read German and English? The harshness of his voice had changed to a warm, kindly texture. Not English, I said, soothed and emboldened by his tone. German. He told me I could have any book I wanted. I was deeply touched by the interest of this man in me, a perfect stranger. I explained that New York had lured me because it was the center of the anarchist movement and because I had read of him as its leading spirit. I had really come to him for suggestions and help. I wanted very much to talk to him. He suggested that I come next Wednesday to help with expediting the Freiheit, to write addresses and fold the papers, and afterwards we may be able to talk. With several books under my arm and a warm handshake, Most sent me off. Berkman left with me. It was late in the evening when we parted. Berkman had told me little about himself except that he had been expelled from the gymnasium for an anti-religious essay he had composed and that he had left home for good. He had come to the United States in the belief that it was free and that here everyone had an equal chance in life. He knew better now. He had found exploitation more severe, and since the hanging of the Chicago anarchists, he had become convinced that America was as despotic as Russia. Ling was right when he said, if you attack us with cannon, we will reply with dynamite. Someday I will avenge our dead, he added and with great earnestness. I too, I cried. Their death gave me life. I now belong to the memory, to their work. He gripped my arm until it hurt. We're comrades. Let us be friends, too. Let us work together. His intensity vibrated through me as I walked up the stairs of the Mencken flat. The following Friday, Berkman invited me to come to a Jewish lecture of Sulu Taruf at 54th Orchard Street on the east side. After the meeting, Berkman introduced me to a number of people, all good active comrades, as he put it. And here is my chum Fedya, he said, indicating a young man beside him. He's also an anarchist, of course, but not so good as he should be. The young chap was probably of the same age as Berkman, but not so strongly built, nor with the same aggressive manner about him. His features were rather delicate, with a sensitive mouth, while his eyes, though somewhat bulging, had a dreamy expression. He did not seem to mind in the least the banter of his friends. He smiled good-naturedly and suggested that we retire to Sachs to give Sasha a chance to tell you what a good anarchist he is. Berkman did not wait till we reached the cafe. A good anarchist, he began with deep conviction, is one who lives only for the cause and gives everything to it. My friend here, he indicated Fedya, is still too much of a bourgeois to realize that. He is a Memenkensen, meaning mother's spoiled darling, who even accepts money from home. He continued to explain why it was inconsistent for a revolutionary to have anything to do with his bourgeois parents and relatives. His only reason for tolerating his friend's Fedya's inconsistency, he added, was that he gave most of what he received from home to the movement. If I'd let him, he'd spend all his money on useless things. Beautiful, he calls them. Wouldn't you, Fedya? He turned to his friend, patting him on the back affectionately. The cafe was crowded as usual and filled with smoke and talk. For a little while, my two escorts were much in demand, while I was greeted by several people I had met during the week. Finally, we succeeded in capturing a table and ordered some coffee and cake. I became aware of Fedya watching me and studying my face. To hide my embarrassment, I turned to Berkman. Why should one not love beauty? I asked. Flowers, for instance, music, the theater, beautiful things. I did not say one should not, Berkman replied. I said it was wrong to spend money on such things when the movement is so much in need of it. It is inconsistent for an anarchist to enjoy luxuries when the people live in poverty. But beautiful things are not luxuries, I insisted. They're necessities. Life would be unbearable without them. Yet at heart, I felt that Berkman was right. Revolutionists gave up even their lives. Why not also beauty? Still, the young artist struck response chord in me. I, too, loved beauty. Our poverty-stricken life in Königsberg had been had made me had been made bearable to me only by the occasional outings with our teachers in the open. The forest, the moon casting its silvery shimmer on the fields, the green reds in our hair, the flowers we would pick. These made me forget for a time the sordid home surroundings. The next day, Fedya took me to Central Park. Along Fifth Avenue, he pointed out the various mansions naming their owners. I had read about those wealthy men, their affluence and extravagance, while the masses lived in poverty. I expressed my indignation at the contrast between those splendid palaces and miserable tenements on the east side. Yes, it's a crime that the few should have all, the many nothing, the artist said. My main objection, he continued, is that they have such bad taste. Those buildings are ugly. Berkman's attitude to beauty came to my mind. You don't agree with your chum on the need of importance of beauty in one's life, do you? I asked. Indeed, I don't. But then my friend is a revolutionist above everything else. I wish I could also be, but I'm not. I liked his frankness and simplicity. He did not steer me as Berkman did when speaking of revolutionary ethics. Fedya awakened in me mysterious yearning I used to feel in my childhood at sight of the sunset turning the populin meadows golden in its dying glow, as the sweet music of Petrushka's flute did also. The following week I spent on Freiheit office. Several people were already there, busy addressing envelopes and folding the papers. Everybody talked. Johann Most was at his desk. I was assigned the place and given work. I marveled at Most's capacity to go on writing in that hubbub. Several times I wanted to suggest that he was being disturbed, but I checked myself. After all, they must know whether he minded their chatter. In the evening, Most stopped writing and gruffly assailed the talkers as toothless old women and cackling geese, and other appellations I had hardly ever before heard in German. He snatched his large felt hat from the rack, called to me to come along, and walked out. I followed him, and we went up on the elevated. I'll take you to the terrace garden, he said. We can go into the theater there if you like. They're giving their Zigeunerbaron tonight. Der Zigeunerbaron, tonight. Or we can sit in some corner, get food and drink and talk. I replied that I did not care for light opera, that what I really wanted was to talk to him, or rather, have him talk to me. But not so violently as in the office, I added. He selected the food and the wine. Their names were strange to me. The label on the bottle read Liebfrauenmilch, milk of woman's love. What a lovely name, I remarked. For wine, yes, he retorted, but not for woman's love. The one is always poetic. The other will never be anything but sordidly prosaic. It leaves a bad taste. I had a feeling of guilt, as if I had made some bad break or had touched the sore spot. I told him I had never tasted any wine before except the kind mother made for Easter. Most shook with laughter, and I was near tears. He noticed my embarrassment and restrained himself. He poured out 2 glasses, saying, "Prosit, my young naive lady," and drank his down at a gulp. Before I could drink half of mine, he had nearly finished the bottle and ordered another. He became animated, witty, sparkling. There was no trace of the bitterness, of the hatred and defiance his oratory had breathed on the platform. Instead, there sat next to me a transformed human being, no longer the repulsive caricature of Rochester Press or the gruff creature of the office. He was a gracious host, an attentive and sympathetic friend. He made me tell him about myself, and he grew thoughtful when he learned the motive that had decided me to break with my old life. He warned me to reflect carefully before taking the plunge. "The path of anarchism is steep and painful," he said. "So many have attempted to climb it and have fallen back. The price is exacting. Few men are ready to pay it, most women not at all." I inquired whether the anarchist movement in America had no outstanding women. "Not at all. Only stupids," he replied. "Most of the girls come to the meetings to snatch up a man, then both vanish, like the silly fisherman at the lure of the Lorelei." There was a roguish twinkle in his eyes. He didn't believe much in woman's revolutionary zeal. But I, coming from Russia, might be different, and he would help me. If I were really in earnest, I could find much work to do. There is great need in our ranks of young, willing people, ardent ones, as you seem to be. And I have need of ardent friendship," he added with much feeling. "You?" I questioned. "You have thousands in New York, all over the world. You are loved and idealized." "Yes, little girl, idealized by many, but loved by none. One can be very lonely amongst thousands. Did you know that?" Something gripped my heart. I wanted to take his hand, to tell him that I would be his friend, but I dared not speak out. What could I give this man? I, a factory girl, uneducated, and he, the famous Johann Most, the leader of the masses, the man of magic tongue and powerful pen. The next day, when Berkman called, I related to him my wonderful evening with Most. His face darkened. "Most has no right to squander money to go to an expensive restaurant, drink expensive wines," he said gravely. "He is spending the money contributed for the movement. He should be held to account. I myself will tell him." No, you must not," I cried. I couldn't bear to be the cause of any affront to Most, who is giving so much. Is he not entitled to a little joy? Berkman persisted that I was too young in the movement, that I didn't know anything about revolutionary ethics or the meaning of revolutionary right and wrong. I admitted my ignorance, assured him I was willing to learn, to do anything, only not to have most hurt. We walked out without bidding me goodbye. He walked out without bidding me goodbye. For a whole week, Berkman did not show up. When he came back again, it was to invite me to for an outing in Prospect Park. He liked it better than Central Park, he said, because it was less cultivated, more natural. We walked about a great deal, admiring rough beauty, and finally selected a lovely spot in which to eat the lunch I had brought with me. We talked about my life in St. Petersburg and in Rochester. I told him of my marriage of Jacob Kirschner and its failure. He wanted me to know he wanted to know what books I had read on marriage and if it was their influence that had decided me to leave my husband. I had never read such books, such works, but I had seen enough on the horrors of married life in my own home. Father's harsh treatment of mother, the constant wrangles and bitter scenes that ended in mother's fainting spells. I had also seen the debasing sordidness of the life of my married aunts and uncles, as well as in the homes of acquaintances in Rochester. Together with my own marital experiences, they had convinced me that binding people for life was wrong. The constant proximity in the same house, the same room, the same bed revolted me. If I if ever I love a man again, I will give myself to him without being bound by the rabbi or the law, I declared. And when that love dies, I will leave without permission. My companion said he was glad to know that I felt that way. All true revolutionists had discarded marriage and were living in freedom. That served to strengthen their love and help them in their common tasks. He told me the story of Sofia Perovskaya and Zhelyabov. They had been lovers, had worked in the same group, and together they elaborated the plan for the execution of Alexander II. After the explosion of the bomb, Perovskaya vanished. She was in hiding. She had every chance to escape, and her comrades begged her to do so, but she refused. She insisted that she must take the consequences, that she would share the fate of her comrades and die together with Zhelyabov. Of course, it was wrong of her to be moved by personal sentiment, Berkman commented. Her love for the cause should have urged her to live for other activities. Again, I found myself disagreeing with him. I thought that it could not be wrong to die with one's beloved in a common act. It was beautiful, it was sublime. He retorted that I was too romantic and sentimental for revolutionists, that the task before us was hard and we must become hard. I wondered if the boy was really so hard, or was he merely trying to mask his tenderness, which I intuitively sensed in him? I felt myself drawn to him and I longed to throw my arms around him, but I was too shy. The day ended in glowing sunset. Joy was in my heart. All the way home I sang German and Russian songs. Vyud Vetri, Vyud Buyni, being one of them. That is my favorite song, Emma, Dorogaya, he said. I may call you that, may I not? And will you call me Sasha? Our lips met in a spontaneous embrace. Most had gone on a lecture tour. From time to time, he would send me a few lines, witty and caustic comments on the people he was meeting, vitriolic denunciation of reporters who interviewed him and then wrote vilifying articles about him. Occasionally, he would include in his letters the caricatures made of him with his own marginal comments. Behold the wife killer, or here's the man who eats little children. When Most returned from his tour, we all went to hear his report. He was more masterly, more witty and defiant against the system than on any previous occasion. He almost hypnotized me. I could not help going up after the lecture to tell him how splendid his talk was. Will you go with me to hear Carmen Monday at the Metropolitan Opera House? He whispered. He added that Monday was an awfully busy day because he had to keep his devils supplied with copy, but that he would work ahead on Sunday if I would promise to come. To the end of the world, I replied impulsively. We found the house sold out, no seats to be had at any price. We should have to stand. I knew that I was in for torture. Since childhood, I had had trouble with the small toe of my left foot. New shoes used to cause me suffering for weeks, and I was wearing new shoes. But I was too ashamed to tell Most, afraid he would think me vain. I stood close to him, jammed in by a large crowd. My foot burned as if it were being held over a fire. But the first bar of the music and the glorious singing made me forget my agony. After the first act, when the lights went on, I found myself holding onto the mast for dear life, my face distorted with pain. What's the matter? He asked. I must get off my shoe, I panted, or I should scream out. Leaning against him, I bent down to loosen the buttons. The rest of the opera I heard supported by Most's arm, my shoe in my hand. I could not tell whether my rapture was due to the music of Carmen or the release from my shoe. We left the opera house arm in arm, I limping. We went to a cafe, and Most teased me about my vanity. But he was rather glad, he said, to find me so feminine, even if it was stupid to wear tight shoes. He was in a golden mood. He wanted to know if I had ever before heard an opera and asked me to tell him about it. Till I was 10 years old of age, I had never heard any music except the plaintive flute of Petrushka, father's stable boy. The screeching of the violins at the Jewish wedding and the poundings of the piano at our singing lessons had always been hateful to me. When I heard the opera Trovatore in Königsberg, I first realized the ecstasy music could create in me. My teacher may have been largely responsible for the electrifying effect of that experience. She had imbued me with the romance of her favorite German authors and had helped to arouse my imagination about the sad love of Troubadour and Leonore. The torturous suspense of the days before Mother gave her consent to my accompanying my teacher to the performance aggravated my tense expectancy. We reached the opera a full hour before the beginning, myself in a cold sweat for fear we were late. Teacher, always in delicate health, could not keep up with my young legs and my frenzied haste to reach our places. I flew up to the top gallery 3 steps at a time. The house was still empty and half lit and somewhat disappointing at first. As if by music, it soon became transformed. Quickly, the place filled with a vast audience, women in silks and velvets of gorgeous hue, with glistening jewels on their bare necks and arms. The flood of light from the crystal chandeliers reflected the colors of green, yellow, and amethyst. It was a fairyland with magnificent than any ever pictured in the stories I had read. I forgot the presence of my teacher, the mean surroundings at my home. Half hanging over the rail, I was lost in the enchanted world below. The orchestra broke into stirring tones mysteriously rising from the darkened house. They sent tremors down by my back and held me breathless by their swelling sounds. Leonore and the troubadour made real my own romantic fancy of love. I lived with them, thrilled and intoxicating by their passionate song. When I had finished relating this to Most, I noticed that his gaze was far away in the distance. He looked up as if from a dream. He had never heard, he remarked slowly, the stirring of a child more dramatically told. I had great talent, he said, and I must begin soon to recite and speak in public. He would make me a great speaker. To take my place when I'm gone, he added. I thought he was only making fun or flattering me. He could not really believe I could ever take his place or express his fire, his magic power. I did not want him to treat me that way. I wanted him to be a true comrade, frank and honest without silly German compliments. Most grinned and emptied his glass to my first public speech. After that, we went out together often. He opened up a new world to me, introduced me to music, books, the theater. But his own rich personality meant far more to me, the alternating heights and depths of his spirit, his hatred to the capitalist system, his vision of a new society, of beauty and joy for all. Most became my idol. I worshipped him.